Hey listeners and viewers, welcome to another edition of the CitizenWolf audio podcast. This is episode 19, I believe you're listening to, and this is the second, I suppose, in a series of podcasts I've done on the Elements of Justice, the Phoenix Wright / MLP crossover series that I've been rather enjoying watching, and of course I managed to get another special guest to talk about that in a little bit more detail. It's James Boote, one of the writers of the show. Hey James, how's it going?
Hi, it's going great. I just said I'm one of the writers. It's primarily what I do, but I also do. I don't create the music, but I just arrange all of the Ace Attorney tracks that are actually in the soundtrack in the episodes.
Oh, I didn't actually know that. So do you pick, so basically you pick which tracks go in which specific order and how to arrange them in the episode?
More or less, yeah. There's actually a story behind that. It's because there's a story behind everything with Elements of Justice. Because I asked Al Javis, who created EOJ, what before I actually even joined, in a YouTube comment, what he was going to do with the music, because I've always been a huge fan of the Ace Attorney music, and he was actually quite forward. He mentioned his, I guess, strategy that he was going to do was use music from the first case. Was going to have music from the very first game, and that it was all going to be orchestrated. And I knew that there was going to be problems with that because not every track had been orchestrated from the first game. So what we eventually ended up doing, and that's kind of when I started getting involved with the music, is I had to think, because we're not using orchestrated music, I suggested that we use tracks from the Leighton crossover, because that actually does have the full suite of the courtroom tracks from the first game. It's in the opening chapter.
When did that come out? Was that 2015, the Leighton crossover, if memory serves me? Was that on the 3DS?
2012 in Japan, because it was made by Level 5, it took fucking forever to come out here. It was in 2014 for us, because Level 5 just takes so long to localize their games. It's insane. I have no idea why.
It's been absolutely years since I've actually played that game. I can barely remember what happens in it. But yeah, so we'll be covering, as I say, we'll be covering a lot of, trying to cover as much as we can as in this episode of the podcast. Talk about Elements of Justice, your experience with the show, and of course we'll talk about Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney as well. I think we'll start off with that first of all, because you are a self-professed fanatic, I suppose, of Ace Attorney. How and when did you get involved with the series? When did you first get involved with? Is that, would you say, is your favourite of the visual novels, or what's your? How did you get started with Ace Attorney specifically?
Well, I've made it no secret, I should say, that I'm a huge fan of Ace Attorney. It's mainly just because of how long that I've actually been a fan, because it's came out in 2005 for everyone in North America, but for us, we got it a few months after the fact. I think it was March 2006 for everyone in the UK, and you actually might know what I'm talking about when I reference this. Have you heard of, defunct now, but have you heard of Official Nintendo Magazine?
Yes, I used to subscribe to that years and years ago, yeah, so then it became Nintendo Official Magazine, and then it folded after a while, but yes.
It sort of faded away in the mid 2010s, and that was actually how I found out about the series. There was an upcoming games section, and one of the games was for the DS. It was Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, and because I think I mentioned this to you before, I was a huge fan of things like, no one outside the UK is going to know what I'm talking about, with things like New Tricks, and they'll know what I mean by Law and Order and CSI, just catch the bad guy kind of shows.
Right, gotcha.
Like mystery and crime solving kind of shows.
Crime dramas, got that kind of thing. Yeah.
I was about 11 at the time when I really got into that kind of stuff, and coincidentally, that's when I saw the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney in the Official Nintendo Magazine. The brief description that it gave, it kind of sounded right up my alley, so I bought it, and I've been a huge fan ever since. Been there for the ups, the downs, and every moment in between.
So you say it came out in 2006 in the UK specifically. So did you play? So you started off with the original English DS localized version, or did you actually manage to play the original Japanese version? That came out in 2001, if my memory serves.
Yeah, that was something that I didn't even know until I actually got into like the fandom itself, because I didn't even know there was a fandom to begin with. Like once that original game came out in 2006, I think it was in 2007 when I actually found out about there's this one site. I think it's still up, but nobody really uses it anymore because it's a forum which have kind of like fallen out of favor these days. It was courtrecords.net, which is like the main like Ace Attorney hub. When I first like realized that there was actually like it wasn't just me that enjoyed these really niche titles for the DS.
It's definitely niche to begin with, but I don't think it's as niche as it once was, like the visual novel genre. But like I think, is it fair to say that Ace Attorney popularized it in the West, the concept of the visual novel, because that visual novels are really, really popular in Japan? Do you think, is it fair to say that Ace Attorney started that ball over in the West?
I would say so, yeah, because I think I can't remember any other visual novel titles before it, because this was like really early on in like mid 2000s, and Professor Layton is actually partially based character-wise anyway on Phoenix Wright. They've like admitted that themselves that the character is basically Phoenix Wright without all the character flaws.
Right.
So it did definitely sort of kickstart some sort of movement to bring over more of these kind of titles.
I'm just trying to think. Was there anything before Ace Attorney over here that gained any pop? I really don't think there is. Like as I say, visual novels were they've been around for a while, but again, it was mainly Japanese only kind of thing. They're really really
Yeah,
popular over there. They were certainly around since the 80s and 90s, like on like the PC, like the PC platform and stuff. They tend to be really popular on the PC, but I can't think of another example earlier prior to Phoenix Wright that got popular over. I really don't think. I can't think of
yeah,
another example anyway.
they were primarily just in Japan. Like, I think it was just this year, wasn't it, when Famicom Detective Club was like first localized, and that was out since like the 80s.
A fan translation, is it? Do you mean, or was it officially released?
Officially localized, and then they released a new game. I think it was called like Emu or something.
Right, I haven't come across that one, to be brutally honest, but yeah, that's cool to see. Definitely, yeah. A lot of the Phoenix Wright was the one that like got big first over here, and then like you got other games that started like trickling down over the years after that. I played the ones I played anyway. I think the closest I could say, Danganronpa, the first one. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah,
That was a good game. Didn't rate the second one as much, but that's a story for another time. And I think there was a. It was Trauma Center, I think it was. That was the Wii version. I remember that being pretty good as well. But
right. I remember that. That's like a hospital game, isn't it? Where it's like
Yes, it was. Yes, it was originally on the DS, and then like they released like an enhanced version on the Wii with. It was where you had to like do the operations with the Wii remote. I remember that being quite a good game. I wasn't very good at it, but it was. That's the closest thing I can think of. The closest game I can think of anyway in terms of the format of Phoenix Wright, as close I can think of anyway. But yeah, I remember enjoying that quite fondly. But
the DS was just a hub for these sorts of games. Like you've got basically all these Attorney games, and then you've got Fascinating. You've got two really really good. I think not really visual novels, sort of like point and click games with like a rotoscope style. They're called Hotel Dusk, Room 215.
yeah, I've heard of that. I never played that though. I've heard that was supposed to be good.
You should. It's really really good. The second one was actually only released in Europe as well because the company unfortunately went bankrupt.
Oh, that's a shame. Right.
America never got that one.
I wonder why that is. Did it not sell very well? That reason why it only sold in Europe?
Probably because the company's called Cing, and they were quite small. They're not like a massive company like Capcom or anything. So for them to be selling like really niche titles, I mean, makes sense because they wouldn't want to sell. You don't expect them to make something massive, but yeah, they released a few titles. I think you might have heard of one of their other ones as well. It actually went by two different names. In America, I think it's called Trace Memory, and in everywhere else, including the remake that it got this year, it's called Another Code.
I've heard of another code. Yes, I've heard another code. Yeah. It's ringing a vague bell. It's going back to the DS days. It's ringing a vague, like is it similar to? Is it similar to that? Is it the Fatal Frame franchise? Is it where you take photos? Is it, or am I thinking of something completely different? It is ringing a vague bell. Definitely.
I think you might be just comparing them, because I think I've not actually played another code. I've just heard of it. I do know that there is like a ghost in the game, so that's probably why you're making the comparison there.
Yeah, that I think you're right on that one. Yeah, that's where I'm like, the lines have blurred. It's been a while since I've last picked up my DS. To be honest with you, the 3DS I should say. That's been ages since I've actually picked it up. But that's another one I never played. It's just when it comes to visual novel games, I'm not very good at them. That's why I don't tend to play them that often. I find you have to be kind of like a. You have to be with it, and you have to. Well, speaking with Ace Attorney anyway, you have to. I've only started playing it recently, the Steam version, the HD re-release of it. I'm playing it on my Steam Deck, and you really do have to think between the lines and think about like how you play Revenants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I am enjoying it, even though I'm not brilliant at it, but I am enjoying how it's playing out thus far. But I'll talk about it a little bit later on, I think.
You kind of have to think of what the developer is thinking, their like train of logic.
Yes.
Which can be easy, can be sometimes a little bit obtuse, but
I guess it kind of shares that it's that crossover with adventure games, like the old point-and-click adventure games, where like you got that moon logic kind of going on.
Yeah.
Again, like, as you were saying, you have to think about like what you have to think about from a puzzle perspective. You have to think what was the developer thinking and what they expect you to do and how to solve it.
Yeah.
It's not always straightforward. As I say, I played a few point-and-click adventures, but like Ace Attorney is probably like the most, I guess you could say, purist in terms of visual novels and stuff. But you do have to think on your toes. So what would you say is the best aspect of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney? Then, what do you enjoy about it the most? Is it the puzzle solving, or is it the story, or anything else in particular?
On a general sense, I'd probably say the story, but I think the characters are also like a massive like selling point, because you see it all the time. You know, when a character gets brought back, everyone's like, especially, well, I'll rephrase that. When they actually were making new games, when their character got brought back, everyone was like, "Oh, they're back!" Like, people really do love these characters, and especially like certain characters. Like, you've probably already met him, but Detective Gumshoe is probably one of the most beloved characters
yeah.
of like in the series.
The scatterbrained detective who's not very good at his job.
Yeah, whose name is Detective.
God, is that is that a translation thing, or was that what he was known in the original Japanese release? I know they had to change a few things for the localization.
Well, all the names in Japan are still puns. They're just different puns, you know, like that would make more like sense culturally.
Right.
Like if there's something that just doesn't make sense like at all, they'll obviously translate it. Like there's a character in The Greatest Attorney who's called it is a British character, but his name is a Japanese pun in the Japanese release.
Right.
His name is Cosney McGundle, which is like a very like weird way of like saying I think it's based on a turn of phrase called like, I'll not say anything in Japanese because I can't speak it, but it's like a turn of phrase that has to do with like, I'll give you some spare change, and he's like a really rich character.
Right.
And so they translated him as, in the official English release, as Magnus McGilded.
Magnus McGilded, right. Like a property magnate gilded with... I can see where they're going with that. Yeah, I can see where they're going with that.
So it's really like interesting things like that, where you have to take a pun in Japanese and then like make it make sense in English, basically.
And that's not always easy to do, is it? Like, because like you've got different like language structures, and like we use different phrases for different things. That's another long-standing writer's problem, isn't it? Like having to localise into a different language. But I think we'll probably talk about a little bit. That'll probably be more relevant a bit later on, I suppose. I think. So what would you say? Would you say the first one is your favourite in the series, or do you prefer like some of the more later entries in the series?
I think my favorite game is probably Ace Attorney Investigations 2. And that's mainly just because it acts as like a very definitive like end point for like several characters and their arcs. It was also the one game that I can say did the whole every case is important, structure
Right.
the best. Because usually in like the first like few games you have like filler cases that are just kind of there to just be there really. Like the first case in the second game is literally just a tutorial. It has no purpose beyond that. And it's only really with like Trials and Tribulations, the third game, where the tutorial case actually played a role in the story.
Right.
And even then you had like there's a thing that people like to reference. It's called like third case syndrome. You might have heard of it.
It's ringing a bell, but for the listeners at home, could you explain what that is in context of Ace Attorney? What does Case 3 syndrome mean?
It's basically a theory that that the third case in every Ace Attorney game is going to be like the duff one. Basically,
Oh, right,
it's going to be the one
right.
that kind of falls flat.
The predictable one, right? Okay.
Not necessarily predictable, just like in terms of like this sucks basically.
Oh, right. Okay. Look, they thrown all the best ideas into Case 1 and 2, and then they're just scraping the barrel for number 3.
Yeah, you can kind of see where that idea comes from when you get to Justice for All, because the third case in that game it's dire.
Right.
It's probably what people would consider like one of, if not the worst case in the entire series.
Why would you consider it the worst in the series? Is it just badly written, or is it boring, or?
Well, I personally don't. I think there is a case worse than that, but
Right.
for a lot of people, it's just because it's just annoying, really. Because people, it's set in a circus, so you have really like hyperactive music droning into your ear like all the time. Because they reuse like 2 tracks quite often in that case. The characters are all like super like exaggerated, even like by Ace Attorney standards. So like they're really like kind of annoying, and there's like some like kind of like wonky bits of logic, but it's just mainly just people getting annoyed, really.
Just get annoyed with the whole form. So where does that sit in the series then? Is that the what entry is that in the series then?
That's in the second game, Justice for All.
Oh, that's the second
It's,
one.
Turnabout Big Top is the one that a lot of people really don't like.
Right. And it's good for like a latecomer like me, I suppose, because it's only very recently they've actually started like releasing a lot of the HD re-releases on Steam, and I think the one you mentioned, Investigations 2, is it? That's only very recently been given the HD treatment for it, I'm pretty sure. I saw that.
Yeah, that came out very recently. It's also the first time that it's been localized, because for like the past like 13 years, it's stayed in Japan. What happened is that the first Investigations game, Miles Edgeworth Ace Attorney Investigations, it was released in 2009, and looking back, you can kind of tell that something was up, because all the games prior to that had been localized in full EU languages. You know, they had Italian, French, German, Spanish. Ace Attorney Investigations was only released outside of Japan in English, and all of us were kind of thinking, like, why is that? And once the game had been released, a sequel was announced, Ace Attorney Investigations 2, and everyone was like, really excited. There's another Ace Attorney game, cool. And then Capcom said absolutely nothing, and then people were waiting for any sort of announcement that it would be brought over. Radio silence. So everyone on courtrecords.net, that Ace Attorney hub, we were getting really nervous that this wouldn't be brought over. So what we did was, me and about a dozen other people raided the Capcom forum, the official Capcom forum, which was Capcom Unity, I think was the name of it. It doesn't exist now, unfortunately.
Right.
Because forums have just been done away with entirely.
It's all Discord-based stuff now, which
Yeah,
I
much.
don't like, to be honest, because it's all too ethereal now. Like the Discord servers disappear all the time and all that stuff. But that's one of the problems. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah, and there was a Q&A going on at the time with, and one of the people on the Q&A was at the time, the vice president of Capcom USA, Christian Svensson. And what we did was we just spammed the question of what is going on with Ace Attorney Investigations 2? Why aren't you localizing Ace Attorney Investigations 2? And then he actually did answer us. He says that the game wasn't being localized, and that was pretty much it. That didn't really sit well with us. What we did was we created a massive like mega thread on the Capcom Unity site. I think it was called the Why Aren't You Localizing Investigations 2 thread. And that was when he, like, I really respect him for doing this as well, because he personally came into the thread and explained to us in detail why it wasn't being localized. The main thing was piracy, and as you may remember, the DS was pirated to hell and back. I think everyone on my in my school had like an R4 card, like with games on it. This was in like 2011. The original DS was 2004. Yeah, the DS Lite was in like 2006, I think it was. Yeah, the DS was particularly like noteworthy for being pirated because I don't think they really anticipated it to be as broken into as it was. And it was mainly piracy, but there was also another reason, and that was the fact that the team working on Investigations 2, they had already moved on to their next project, which I think was Dual Destinies, actually, because what would happen is the localization team would work with the original team themselves to localize the game, and because they had already moved on, because they would Dual Destiny was released like quite soon after in like 2013. There was no communication going on between them. There was no chance of communication. So it was just a bad situation all around. And also the fact that the DS was on its way out. The 3DS was coming up in 2012. It was just released at the wrong time. At the very end of the DS's lifespan. There was no sort of communication going on. And the fact that it was pirated. And it sold very poorly, the original Investigations. Apparently it did not meet sales expectations.
Was it reviewed very well?
No, that was the piracy that they were referring to.
Right.
Because they attributed the poor sales to piracy. So it was just a bad situation all around. And it really did kind of suck to be an Ace Attorney fan at that point because we had no idea what was going on with the crossover. Capcom actually said, basically, go ask Level 5, because we're not the ones localizing that game. Investigations 2 had been kind of shit-canned, and we basically had nothing. We had no idea what was going on. When Dual Destinies was announced, people were even afraid that we weren't even going to get that. That's how bad things were. And fortunately, that's how I actually found Turnabout Storm, because we had no Ace Attorney content, and I was just feverishly looking for anything to do with Ace Attorney to actually, consume.
Completely starved of Ace Attorney content. You're looking for like in the fan realm, basically.
Yeah, just looking for anything because it was just bad news bears at that point. It was just we were not doing good. That is literally the dark age of like the Ace Attorney fandom.
The dark age of the series.
Yeah. At least for the Western fan base, the Japanese fan base, they were doing fine. Lucky bastards.
So I wonder, I think they must have had in recent years. They must have had a change of heart there because, as I say, they've started releasing them on Steam and like HD re-releases, and of course Investigations too. They must have had a change of heart in that perspective then, because they've actually
absolutely. It's been like a massive. I'll say it just for the meme. It's been a massive turnabout because I think they went from before the original trilogy was released in 2019. I think the sales were at like something like 6 million sold, and now they've released like the most recent one, and it's like over 12 million. So in like 5 years, they've like doubled the sales, lifetime sales for the series. So it's been really ridiculous, and I think the original trilogy's 2019 release has been like one of the best-selling Capcom games of all time. That's how ridiculous it is.
And for a visual novel game as well, like that's crazy numbers as well.
Yeah, it really did. It revitalized the franchise. Because I think Capcom were kind of like, we'll throw this game out. If it doesn't do well, then we only like sunset the series. But if it does sell well, then we'll consider doing more with the series. So we were on our last legs, and people bought the game, people love the game, and a lot of new people love the game, which is the most important thing because the franchise just exploded. Like the the fan base just expanded dramatically.
And I think with the PC platform Steam as well, it's a lot. It's so accessible as well. That's partly probably why it's so successful. Like you can instead of having to like, well, not everybody has access to handhelds and stuff like that. But with Steam, it's like with the sales and stuff like that, it's you got a much bigger reach of customers to get to, and like it's the accessibility. I think that's the crucial thing. Like being able to just play it on a laptop or what have you, which is fantastic. And of course, if you've got a Steam Deck, it's great for Steam Deck. That's what I'm currently playing it on as well. And it's like you got a whole new audience of people who've never played it before, myself included, which is it's sort of passed me by, and it's only like because I'm starting looking into EOJ stuff. I've actually started to let's actually play it. Let's give it a go, and with a nice HD upgrade and like with cleaner audio and stuff like that, it's probably the best way to play it. I think probably compared to the really
the new
sorry, carry on.
Yeah, the new releases. Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
Compared to like the original crunchy DS releases, but like as I said, the Game Boy Advance and DS era, like it's over 20 years ago now. It's pretty frightening now how much time has passed. But like it's compared to like the version we've got now with HD remaster and like the new artwork and everything, it's probably the best way to play it, I'd say.
Yeah, the new releases are absolutely the definitive way to play the series. Not just in terms of like it looking good. What they've actually done is, at least for the releases they have now, is what they've done is they've gone back into the script and actually like touched it up a little bit. You know, some errors that were in the original DS release no longer exist now, which I think it shows that they actually really do care, because they could have just farted this out into the atmosphere and just left people to play the game as it was released in like 2005. But they actually went and did almost a complete overhaul of the original script, at least for the original trilogy. Because if you go back and play the DS release, and then compare it to the one that we have now, you can tell that there are a lot of discrepancies. Like there are some lines that don't really make sense. There are some actual like translation errors. There are some continuity errors as well, which is really interesting, because what happened is that the first game was translated without knowledge of the third game. So things that some people say in the original DS game that was translated into English kind of conflict with what happens later on.
Right.
But they went and fixed that all up completely, which got their hand to them that they didn't have to do that, but they did it anyway.
And I think partly because Capcom are on pretty good. They've been on pretty good form in recent years, I have to say. Like they've been, like with like some of the remasters, or like the remakes, I should say. Like the Resident Evil remakes have been really good, and like they seem to be paying more attention to the PC platform as well, which not just the consoles, which is really good, which I enjoy. And like they're not just like releasing like a half-assed sort of game what they might have done, like say 10-15 years ago. They're actually like putting effort into a lot of stuff they do now, which is really, really good.
Yeah, they've had a complete turnaround. Like you can remember back in the I think it was like the mid 2010s, where everyone was like just completely shitting on Capcom for every decision that they made. Rightly so, because they were poor decisions, but now they've gone back to like Cap God status.
They seem to have certainly turned around their fortunes, and that from my perspective anyway. But like from what the stuff that they've been releasing in recent years have been very, very good. Maybe is it too much to ask for a Dino Crisis remake? Please, can we have one of those? I've never played it. I'd like to play it. It was that weird Dino Resident Evil Dino shooting game on PlayStation. I never had a chance to play.
Yeah,
I want that would have been
pretty much what it is. Yeah,
that would have been an interesting one to. Well, we shall see, as they say. But yeah, Capcom have been on pretty good form lately, which is pretty good to see. What this is the stupid little silly little question I've written down. It like, what's this ladder versus step ladder debate? Then I've only been reading about this briefly. Could you explain what this is? Because I think it's a joke that's gone over my head, but like there's something behind it. I just know there is.
Yeah, there is. It's just a running gag in Ace Attorney. It shows up in every game, as it should do. It starts off in the third case of the first game, where you can examine a ladder or a step ladder in the background of one of the locations.
One of the movie studios, isn't it, or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the main character and the assistant for the game will just argue about it. That's pretty much all it is. It's just one of those silly running gags that always manages to show up.
And people just argue that's a stepladder. No, it's not a stepladder. It's a.
Yeah, it's kind of like the the Christmas meme that people in Ace Attorney always post on like December 24th, like of Phoenix at the stand saying almost Christmas means it wasn't Christmas.
For my money, based on the HD version of the one I'm playing on Steam Deck, the first ladder you come across is a step ladder. It is a step ladder. For me. But people like to argue, no, it's not a step ladder, it's a ladder. But what's the? Oh, it's just it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's actually thanks to that joke that, well, I was convinced anyway that the crossover was going to be localized, the Layton crossover, because in the fourth Layton game, you can actually examine a ladder in the background, and the character's like internal monologue is, "Oh, that's a step ladder, or is it a ladder?"
Okay.
And that's only in the European release.
I wonder why it's only in that version. I wonder why.
I think it's because the European release was released after, and probably after they'd already like confirmed like internally that they were going to be localizing the crossover, and they just put that in as a little hint for the fans.
That's cool.
But yeah, that was what convinced me that they were finally going to be localizing the Layton crossover, and I was just like, thank fuck for that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like going back to EOJ for a moment. It's of course like. No, Turnabout Storm, I should say. I'll get my timeline mixed up here. Like Turnabout Storm was the first. Was the first probably one of the early Phoenix Wright crossovers? It came out before the Layton crossover. That was in 2014. Was that 2014, 2015?
It was released in Japan in 2012, but obviously Turnabout Storm was like months before that.
So yeah, so it basically came out. That's probably the most famous of the crossovers, the Layton crossover. But like Turnabout Storm came out before that, I suppose. It is interesting on that.
I think it was October 2011 the first episode came out.
And then it finished 2 years later in 2013. Was it October or November? I can't exactly remember. I have to check my notes. But 2 years over 6 episodes.
Yeah, just about 2 years, yeah.
Which is pretty crazy. I don't know. It just seems like I've always... I don't know. Phoenix Wright seems to be. I don't know. It seems to. There's quite a few crossovers with the Phoenix Wright property. You got like a few fighting games. You got a few puzzle games here and there, and references in other games. And of course, Layton's a perfect fit because it's like a puzzle game. It's sort of a lot of the elements are already there for a crossover to take place. But it does for a lot of people. I guess myself included. I'm still like It doesn't seem like something that would work, but like you got MLP and you got Phoenix Wright, but they seem to mesh together rather well. If you go with as far as Turnabout Storm goes, like the formula worked pretty well, and it for a lot of people it just seems like that doesn't seem like something that would work, but it seems to do for some reason.
It's something that I've definitely thought about. I think it's mainly just because they touch on very similar themes, very like broad themes as well, of like truth and justice and doing the right thing, like what is right, and the difference between right and wrong, things like that. And it's just it just kind of worked. Like the sense of humor is quite, don't really know how to say it. It's just it really worked. Like it just kind of gelled together really well.
It meshed together really well, like a lot better than a lot of people expected, I think, to be honest. And it really was ahead of its time. Turnabout Storm, 2011. That's really early MLP fandom, and it's one of the very early examples of fan-made creations that actually was completed, because a lot of similar projects like ended up being cancelled or discontinued for whatever reason. But that's one of the really early ones that came out and actually got released and stuff like that. And watching it back again has been an interesting experience because I'm having to do a lot of research for this EOJ thing I'm working on. Watch that first, I'd say, and then because a lot of that is a primer stuff for EOJ, because EOJ is still ongoing and there's a lot more.
Yeah, it's a direct sequel, so Turnabout Storm is definitely recommended to watch beforehand.
But yeah, so we'll probably talk about Turnabout Storm in a little bit more later on. But of course, you're involved with the Elements of Justice EOJ project. How exactly did you get involved with that? First of all, did you apply to be a part of it, or were you requested to join the project? Because my understanding was you were brought on to help tidy up the writing of Case 1. Please do correct me if I'm getting my facts wrong here, but please, how did you get involved with EOJ to begin with?
Well, that's what it eventually became. What started out was I watched the trailer for Elements of Justice. I think it was released in like 2015, the original trailer anyway. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And then I decided that I'll watch that when it comes out. I did when the first episode came out 4 years later after massive like hard drive failures from the Al Javis. And he still managed to make an episode even after that. He basically had to restart the whole thing.
So that's what was the massive delay. It was a hard drive failure, was it?
Yeah, he lost all the voice files. Yeah, it really sucked. He lost all the voice files, and he had to ask everyone to redo their lines, which kind of worked out in his favor because everyone had obviously aged since then, and so they sounded a lot more like in character.
What they should do, narrative like timeline. Right, gotcha.
Yeah. So that was 2019 when the first episode came out. I watched it like many other people, and just my opinion on the first episode, I thought it was good. Could have been better, in my opinion, and that's mainly just because Al Javis was doing literally everything. He was doing the everything besides the voice acting. Obviously, he was doing the editing. He was doing the script by himself. He was doing all of the rigging for the ponies. He had to find all of the Ace Attorney sprites, including ones for characters that don't even have like official like 2D sprites, which is really annoying because we've actually had to make our own now. But back then it was just like you had to find like really crunchy like 2D sprites for things like front-facing Apollo and just Athena in general.
So just to clarify for listeners at home, Al Javis was the creator of EOJ. He was the one who started it all back in 2015.
Yeah, that's right. And he was doing pretty much everything by himself until 2019 when the first episode came out and he realized this isn't feasible anymore. I need help.
Like he started from the offset, 5 full cases as well. That's insane.
Yeah.
For one person to do.
Yeah, he's admitted himself that it was kind of like his Applejack moment where he needs to realize that he can't do everything by himself.
My goodness.
So then what he did was he put out a not really a casting call, but like a call for help essentially of like different roles that he was after. You know how you had things like audio engineers, you had riggers for the pony characters, and then you had not writers, script proofreaders. That's the original role that we had.
Right.
And originally I thought that was just like, oh, that means that the entire series has been written then. We're just like going over all of, the content and
checking for errors and things like that.
Yeah, things like that, and making sure that everything is just on point. So I just thought, okay, I'll do that. And so I applied, and what we did was he gave us the script for the first episode, and what we had to do was basically go through that script and basically proofread, just go through and check for any errors, make minor alterations if necessary, and yeah, that's what I did. I think I had like the most changes out of anyone at like 160 something edits made, because there were some things that I changed like completely outright. There was one scene that I just changed completely because you probably remember in the first episode they go up to the cakewalk.
Yes, that's become a meme. That's probably the most famous meme of Case 1 anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So
cakewalk instead of catwalk.
Yeah. So all the characters go up to the catwalk, including Apollo himself. I don't blame Al for this because it was only really until Spirit of Justice, which was released after he had written all of this, that they even make a big deal out of it. But Apollo is actually afraid of heights, and he is kind of like shitting himself going up to the catwalk in the case in Spirit of Justice. So I felt he was a little bit too like relaxed for that sort of situation. So what I did was I kept him down below on the stage and just had him sort of like make up an excuse to not go up to the catwalk.
Yeah, only a Phoenix Wright fan like yourself would spot something like that. Like if he
Yeah,
actually went up to the catwalk, it wouldn't make sense from a canonical perspective because of
yeah.
yeah.
Like I said, I don't blame Al for that because there's only literally one line before Spirit of Justice about Apollo's like fear of heights, and it's from Turnabout Serenade, which is my vote for the worst case in the entire series. So I don't blame him for not noticing a throwaway line like that, which is yeah, I don't blame him because it's such a they only make a big deal out of it in content after he had written the script because I think this was written in like 2014, I think, just after like just after Dual Destinies had actually been released, and so we submitted all of our like edited scripts, and then Al Javis contacted me and some others, and we got the position. I did find out after the fact though that some people had only actually applied for the proofreader role because they thought they would give them access to future scripts.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
But yeah, me and four others got picked for the proofreader role, which eventually became like a full-on writing role once we decided to rewrite the trial for case one because we felt that it would be a bit better if we went in slightly different direction.
So that was your idea and the other writer's idea to actually rewrite what was written to make it, as you feel, make it better, but what was already existing.
Yeah, because it was one of the writers that suggested it, Serenity, who said that he would just sort of like propose the idea, like what do we all think about a potential rewrite for the trial? And I was a little bit like hesitant at first because I didn't think that was our role. But once he sort of explained like how he thought that it could be better, I completely agreed because the original script, because Al had written out the entirety of case one. It existed at that point. We've actually mentioned this before, but I'll mention it here again as well. The ending of case one was completely different to what it is now. In the original ending, Suri actually did kill overall concept.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
And it was basically like, the way I described it was basically like, it was kind of like a really bog standard, like, tutorial case, both in a good and a bad way. Good in the sense that it was like it was quite simple, easy to understand, easy to get back into the groove of things. You don't have to like 10 years away for MLP fans that aren't Ace Attorney fans. But it's also a little bit too simple.
Or too predictable, perhaps.
Yeah, there was not much to like entice people to keep watching, after the fact.
Right.
So what we did was we basically turned overall concepts death into what I would describe as one of like the like long running mysteries of the series. Because even now it's still a mystery what happened exactly.
Yeah, it's made open ended. Maybe that'll be explored later on. But yeah, I can see why that was implemented as opposed to the previous iteration of the script. That makes sense.
Yeah, because this is pretty much what like Ace Attorney games do now. Is the tutorial case is like a major factor in like the story as a whole. It's not just its own thing that just sort of exists as a tutorial.
It's basically the centerpiece of the whole story once all the other cases are built around it, basically.
In some cases, yeah. Sometimes it's just, like hints at the future of like where the series could be going. But yeah, what we've done is fairly like standard for like modern Ace Attorney games.
What would you say was there any major difficulties in actually writing case one? What would you say that anything that stands out? Was it difficult to rewrite what was already placed in front of you? Was that one of the major stepping points of case one?
I think the biggest problem is honestly that episode one already existed because what we had to do was explain things that we felt should have been explained in episode one, which kind of dragged out the runtime of, especially like the second episode. Because you'll notice that the runtime for episode one and then episodes 2 and 3 is quite different. Like episode 1 is like I think only like 50 minutes long,
Right.
whereas episodes 2 and 3 like they're like approaching like if not exceeding the 2 hour mark because there's a lot of information that should have been conveyed in episode 1 that we had to then retroactively implement in the future episodes.
Right. It was quite difficult to work around that existing framework, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also there were just additional things that we felt would have made things more interesting. Like one of them is Coco and Overall being a couple. That is something that was originally not in the original outline for Case 1. And I think that's something that makes Case 1 a lot more interesting, honestly, because it adds a lot more to Coco as a character. Along with Coco then testifying for Suri's sake, because originally it was just like Suri's the one that did it, prove that she's guilty, jobs are good. And
Right.
but now because Suri isn't guilty, Coco proves that she wasn't, and she stands up for her. So there's a lot going on with Coco compared to the original version where she was basically just the defendant.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. I think it was pretty wise to change from the original draft. Let's just say the Suri being the killer, because I think a lot of if you're a big fan of MLPG4, you'd probably a lot of people would have guessed who's the one who's going to be the murderer, who doesn't like Coco. Oh, it's going to be Suri. So I guess it would have been probably a bit too predictable to have Suri as the killer.
Yeah, particularly because she actually does appear in the first episode as a cameo. Everyone would have just guessed immediately that it's her, which is what we lead you down that road of thinking that she's going to be because she is essentially the main antagonist of the case, but then we sort of pull the rug out from under you and say that actually no, she's not the one. But then who could have done it?
And then it's implied, at least initially, that it was a suicide, not a murder. But then that gets turned on its head later on in Case 2 onwards.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, it does make sense that main aspect was changed. I think because I think a lot of people would have guessed that. If she stayed as the murderer, it would have been a bit too obvious. So, but again, she had to be involved somehow because she's quite. Well, she was an integral part of the Manhattan. That's the sort of aspect of the story and things like that.
Yeah.
So it makes
this
sense.
This case is essentially just kind of like a sequel to Rarity Takes Manhattan in a sense.
Yeah. Yes. Precisely. Yes. That's what I was thinking of. But yes. So it does make sense that main aspect was changed. So, but as I say, with EOJ. That wasn't the first, of course, as you mentioned, with the hard drive failure malfunctioning and stuff like that. That wasn't the first instance of the project. Of course, I've already spoke to Mr. G. You've listened to that episode already.
Yeah,
he did talk a bit more in detail about how the project. What I was gathering anyway. What I was gathering was that the Case 2 was when things were starting to, the project was starting to hit a bit of turmoil. Is that fair to say? Seems like a lot of fires were having to be put out in certain different aspects of the team, and you had lots of things going on that was causing issues all the way around. How did any of that affect you as a writer? Was Case 2 a lot more difficult to deal with?
It was, yeah, because that was the first case that we were actually writing from scratch. Because Case 2, again, along with Case 1, is completely different. Because I think you mentioned this before, but Athena being the lead attorney, that was something that we brought to the case. Originally, it was just Phoenix again. Myself, in particular, I thought that was kind of a bad idea. Don't get me wrong, I like Phoenix. I think he takes up too much screen time sometimes, though.
Right.
Especially in the sequel trilogy, where new characters should be getting their dues. Especially Athena, who was, as I've said before, she has been underutilized to the extreme. To say that she's been underutilized would be an understatement.
So would you say it was predominantly your idea to bring in Athena, or was it one of the other writers, or was it a collaborative idea to use Athena in Case 2?
It was more of a collaborative thing, but I was definitely insistent that this would be the case, because she's not my favourite character, but I sympathise with people that really do like Athena, because she doesn't get anything. Dual Destinies is her game, but she's not really playable for a lot of it. And then in Spirit of Justice, she's got one throwaway filler case, and that's about it.
Right.
So giving her a case where she stands on her own 2 feet, and she's playable for its entirety, because it is quite a long case.
Yeah, case 2 is considerably longer than case 1 for people who are interested, but yeah, case 2 is quite big.
Yeah.
Quite
So
big.
so a lot of Athena content is always a good thing, in my opinion. We started from scratch and we had to change a lot of things. One of them is the killer. For anyone that's seen case 2, you know how that ends. You know how tragically it ends. The killer was completely different in the original outline that Al wrote like some 5 years ago in like 2015. Because he wrote all of case 2 and case 1 years ago, like before he even released any of the episodes at all. The original killer for case 2 was actually Fair Devotion.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
But we changed it to have more of a thematically fitting angle to it, especially since Athena is the attorney for the case. Anyone that knows anything about Athena knows that, a child killing their parent is something that hits pretty close to home.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that influenced you to, and the rest of the team to, like, oh, let's put Athena in there instead to go with that angle.
We wanted to put Athena in anyway, but the fact that we wanted to change the killer to make it a bit more, tragic, that it just all worked really well in terms of like how appropriate it was.
It's as I was saying with so compared to case 1, case 2 is, well, it's considerably longer than case 1. It's a completely different beast. It is a bit divisive. It is a bit divisive. A lot of people love it. A lot of people tend to say, "Oh, case 3 is better," what have you. But I will reserve judgment until case 3, at least until case 3 is finished. I've only seen only half of it's available so far, so it's a bit unfair for me to throw out an opinion, like compare them both when only one of them's like half finished at the moment.
Yeah,
but
that's true. Yeah,
it's case 2. Oh God, case 2. I'm still there's a lot of stuff it does really, really well, and there's also a lot of stuff I'm not quite sure of, I suppose. But again, I'm not going to like throw a judgment out there until I've actually watched it again, because I'm kind of weird. I watched it in probably like I'm built different, as they say. I watched it. I kind of I binged a lot of it. That's probably not a good idea to do.
Yeah, it sounds kind of insane given how long it is.
Yeah, I kind of binged a lot of it. But what you're going to do, I was ill that one. I think I came back from GalaCon in Germany. I think like the following week I had the following week off, and like I was just ill for a few days. So I thought, I'll watch it. I literally only found out about Elements of Justice at that very convention. I thought, oh, is that anything to do with Turnabout Storm? Then it was. Then I watched Turnabout Storm again, and then I started binging EOJ as far as I could. I got halfway through case 2. I watched an awful lot in those 2 or 3 days, but that's probably not the best way of doing it. Consuming all in one go, a lot to take in. But also mainly because of, like, I was speaking to, of course, Mr. G. Of course, I've already mentioned already in the previous episode how it affected him and stuff like that, because like a lot of, as I was saying, a lot of turmoil in the team, a lot of key players left. Of course, Al Javis left at the end of case 2. That's quite a big player. Serenity also left as well. Was it early on in case 2, I believe?
It was at the end of case 2.
Oh, end of case 2. Right. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. So he also left. He was one of the main writers. He also left, and so basically a lot of the roles that you had previously, a lot of people had to move around. Of course, like my understanding is Jarvie became the team leader at the beginning of case 2. Or was it a little bit after that?
It was at the start of case 3.
Oh, start of case 3, right? But like he was originally a proofreader such as yourself as well, and he became one of the main writers in case 2, I believe.
We all just became writers as soon as we started like writing actual content that wasn't in the original script. It was really weird how it was sort of like evolved into writers. We never actually were given the role like explicitly. We were just sort of like fell into the role once we started writing, a rewrite for case 1, and then started adding more and more to case 2 that wasn't originally there.
Right, gotcha. And it couldn't have been easy for everybody, because like the project seemed to be like going through a lot of turbulence, and like people were leaving, and it couldn't have been easy to having to write all that in such a short time frame as well. It's case 2 is huge. The amount of and that's excluding rewrites and having to get it all proofread and everything. It couldn't have been easy. I don't think it could have been easy on yourself either.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't. I think it was mainly more of a burden on like upper management and like leadership more than the writers themselves. Because we knew what we were writing, but it was mainly just like the production of like getting it out. Because it took 2 years for it to be like fully done, and we even took a break at the very end, just before like the final episode. Because there's actually a probably seen it yourself, but the 2.85.
Right, yeah, the little in betweeny episode, right, yeah.
Yeah, that was originally supposed to be at the end of 2.6 as just like a little animated thing, but miscommunication and people like needing like time away from EOJ and all that sort of thing meant that it got delayed like quite significantly.
Right. And I think I was listening to one of the I think I was listening to the interview with Jarvie and G. Like he mentioned, where like a lot of the writing was sort of siphoned off or siloed off. Basically, there wasn't a lot of communication between the writers. That was causing some issues.
Yeah, it was mainly just that we didn't communicate as much on like current plans. We mostly talked about like the future, which is kind of backwards in a sense, but we needed to know what was going on in the future anyway. But yeah, case 2 was a lot of the like for a bit of it, we're kind of like writing it in the moment, like as opposed to case 3 where everything like we know literally everything that is going to happen and will happen, to the point where like that's honestly why it took as long as it did, because we had to like debrief and like talk about, okay, what are we going to do, whereas now we just know. We know what we're going to do, and that's why even though it's been not even like as long, we are on the final episode writing right now of case 3.
Which is really, really good. So so hopefully by the sounds of it, like a lot of the issues are being addressed now, and everybody's like on track to actually get back into releasing stuff back into 2025 anyway.
Yeah.
But it certainly sounds like it anyway.
Yeah, things are a lot more like meticulously planned in terms of like what each episode is going to be, like the main focus of the episode, as opposed to like case 2 where if something couldn't have been fit in, then tough.
So if so, basically you with the new leadership structures in place now, like you got to be more confident and more strict of what can and cannot go in a particular episode.
Yeah, there's like more of a focus on what is going into the episode, and we all know what is going into the episode because the one that is leading the episode actually does a roadmap of what will be in the episode, and if there are any additional ideas after that, it'll get put in the roadmap.
Right, gotcha. So you basically got like an overview of what you plan to put into each episode and how you're gonna try and implement them.
Yeah, if there are any like additional ideas that we think don't work, or if there are any ideas that are in the roadmap that don't work, we usually just do have a discussion about it. Like there was one idea towards the end of case 3 that we were a little iffy on, and we just hopped in, me and Soundman, who is currently the a director of EOJ, we just hopped into a VC and just talked about like, is this going to work? And then I said, no, that's been binned. We've gone with something else that makes a lot more sense.
So as a writer, of course, like, could you describe the process of when it comes to writing an episode? So what sort of process do you go through? Do you all get together in like a Discord call and like type things out on a document? It's probably more advanced than that. I'm oversimplifying, of course, but what's the kind of process you go through to actually write, for example, write a particular episode? Like, what sort of steps do you go through?
What first happens is we appoint like a not a leader, but just like the one who's going to be in charge of the episode itself, and like dictate the specific direction that it takes in terms of what ultimately makes it into the episode, what characters will say and do. And the one that does that makes the roadmap for the episode. They draft it all out in terms of what they want to see in the episode. And then that usually takes about a week, depending on how bulky the episode is, because there are some episodes that are shorter than others. Some are quite long, especially towards the end of Case 3, where you need to start wrapping things up and explaining, like, as you do in Ace Attorney, where you like reiterate things that were either shown or hinted at the beginning of the case. You have to sort of tackle those at the end and like cap it all off. And then that usually takes about a week, and then the scenes get doled out. Depending on how long the episode is, that depends on how many scenes there are. Usually it's about anywhere from 5 to 6, but there are some instances where logic chess needs to be its own scene, because that is a completely different thing that's just isolated from everything else.
Right.
Regardless of how long or short it may be. And the scenes get doled out. We each do them separately, and then after about a week or two, depending on how long we need, because we have lives outside of EOJ, thankfully. After about a week or two, they all get put into a single document. That what we were doing individually was the first draft. Once they get put into a single document, that's the second draft. Then we start editing it all together, just sort of manually editing it, trimming it down, things that don't need to be said, trimming down on things like repetition and, any errors that were present there, just formatting errors, because we all like to make it nice and clean. And then once a week has passed, or in some cases 2 weeks, we go into the third draft, where we're just minor edits are being made. We're touching it up. It's becoming the final draft. And then fourth draft, which is usually where the one who was in charge of the episode and Java Jared, who's the leader, we go through it. We make sure that it's all looks spick and span, and then that becomes the episode itself.
So an episode, like, before it actually gets to the final stages, it goes through several stages of like a QA, I suppose. If that's the best way to describe it, to polish up the script as best as you can, as everybody can manage, and then like try and make it as good as you can be, basically.
Yeah, at the very least, it goes through 4. After the fourth draft, which becomes the final draft, usually the director will just look at it just to make sure that it aligns with what they're expecting and their expectations based on the series Bible that has been made.
So for the listeners at home, could you explain what the Bible actually is for people who don't know what a Bible is in writing terms?
God, it's basically just everything that did happen in the series timeline, everything that will happen, and everything that doesn't happen is just like background information for like characters that only we are privy to, because there are some things that are just not going to make it in, but just for like lore purposes, and character relationships, and also just very general things like character descriptions and what their goal is, what their role in the story is, what their character arc is if they have one.
Right.
It has literally everything about the series in it, and then some.
And you basically use that as your main reference point. Like if you think of like a plot point to use in the show, in the series, I should say, you can use the Bible to say, oh wait, I can't do that because such and such happens in the Bible, and then you have to. It's your main key reference point, basically. Is
Essentially, yeah, that's basically it.
To make sure that your lore is accurate and like everything aligns with what's happened and what will happen, narratively speaking.
Yeah, exactly. That is our main go-to that we always refer back to.
So it's good to refer to. Are you the keeper of the Bible? I would say.
No,
the law keeper.
The director is.
Right.
In that case, it was G. Now it's Soundman.
So working in a team with people, then how does it differ from, say, like working on a project as a solo project as a writer? How does it differ? How does it differ from working on something on your own compared to working in a team? Do you prefer working in a team, or is there pros and cons to either?
I think there are pros and cons to either. Mainly, just especially since this is like a mainly US based project, just time zones. Getting like it can be sometimes tricky to get everyone together for something because of like different time zones. Like it's mainly a US based project. Obviously, you got me who's in the UK, You've got people in. One of the writers before he left for personal reasons was in Australia.
Right.
Another one was in Japan, which made it like especially difficult to communicate. Which, like G has said, we're an international project. Like compared to what when you're just working by yourself, it's your own time. You're always available whenever you're available. Whereas if you're available, someone else might not be.
Right. It can't be easy, can it? So for example, if you have to like talk to like some of the American writers, like do you have to like pick a specific day in the week and time that everybody can try like most feasibly get together, basically?
Yeah, that's why we have a writers meeting every 2 weeks, and it's usually Sunday at like for my time, UK time, usually about like 4:30. So I think that's midday for Javi Jared, and for the other two writers, Evan and Random, it's usually about like 1 to 2 hours away from that. But it's going to be sometimes tricky because obviously some of us may work on Sundays. But this is the best time that we've found anyway, just based on our own personal situations and when we're available.
Time zones are always a nightmare. no matter what,
absolutely.
No matter what project you're working on, like as I say, it's like, especially when it comes to America, like America's not just one time zone. Like America's got like 6 or 7 different times.
The worst part of it, honestly.
It's like, are you talking East Coast or West Coast? Because there's another 6 or 7 hours between those.
It's so ridiculous.
But yeah, we in British land, UK land, we're in the middle of everything. So, but yeah, so it's not so bad talking to people in Europe, which is like 1 or 2 hours ahead. But like America's a bit tricky. But I suppose you try and get through it as well as you can. Basically, it's not always an easy thing to do. So I think you've already mentioned early in the podcast, of course, like the things that have influenced you. So you say you've always been a fan of like crime dramas and detective fiction and stuff like that. Is there any particular series that you feel has influenced you the most as a writer, would you say, at the top of your head?
It's probably going to sound like a bit of a cop-out answer, but honestly, Ace Attorney, because I think that, especially when it comes to, you might have noticed this yourself, but not really like known how to like describe it, because sometimes I find it hard to describe it myself, how it handles comedy and also like the dramatic elements as well, where it can sometimes, it acts as sort of like a pendulum where it can like swing from like really goofy comedy to right back to serious drama, almost like without any with very easily, basically.
I think it does it quite well. It's like really heavy melodrama, isn't it? It's like,
yeah.
It's like sometimes it's like really goofy with the puns and like the exchange between the characters, and it goes to, oh shit, there's a murder. I think swings quite violently the other way, but it's definitely its own it's very much its own thing, definitely.
Yeah, it's really unique in terms of how it like handles like particularly the comedic elements. I find like it's very quirky in its own sort of way.
It's definitely very quirky, that sort of game. I've only played the first 4. I'm still on case 4 of the first game. I tend to play it like on weekends or whatever when I get a bit of time to myself. It's something nice to play.
Right.
But it's I will get through the other games slowly, and like by the time when I get to finishing this thing I'm working on, I would have played more. I'll have more of an understanding of all the characters and things. But from what I've played so far, definitely it's definitely its own unique beast, I'd say, compared to everything else that I've played anyway. But yeah, it very much is Phoenix Wright, but very much you can't really describe it as anything else. It is its own animal, really. It's difficult to describe, I suppose. But I was apart from Phoenix Wright, of course. What would you say is the most influential thing? Would it be a television series, or would it be a novel you've novel you've read? Because you of course you've mentioned stuff like crime dramas and things like that. Like in the UK, we had compared to American influences are going to be different to British influences in that realm. Like we've got things like Cracker and Taggart and Inspector Frost and things like that. We had that stuff like that. But America, you've got like crime scene investigation and you got Law and Order and that side of things. But yeah, it's. Is there anything, any of those particular series that you've found been a massive influence to you specifically? Would you say?
I think probably CSI, because that was one of the very first things that I watched in that sort of like crime solving genre. I used to watch it when I was like, I think I started watching it when I was about 10. I used to come back from Scouts and watch it afterwards. It's definitely been a big part of my life. Particularly CSI New York. I always found that one a bit more enjoyable for whatever reason. I think it was mainly just because it's New York. It's like the Big Apple, that kind of sort of thing. It's a bit hard to describe it. I just found, especially like the color grade of it, like the first few seasons were like very dark and like kind of like almost mysterious in a way.
And you'd say that's had quite a big influence on the way you approach writing and like your tastes in, like, of course you can see the lineage, definitely, like that sort of thing. Like it makes sense if you're a fan of that kind of fiction. It would make sense that you would be a fan of Phoenix Wright also, because it taps into similar themes.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities in terms of maybe not necessarily the occupational sort of thing, because Law and Order would be the obvious comparison there, but in terms of the common things that often get brought up, like ballistics and fingerprinting and that sort of stuff.
Right, gotcha.
So whenever those things got brought up the first time that I saw them in Ace Attorney, I was like, yeah, I'm familiar with this.
Yeah, I'm hooked. Please give me more. That's how it starts, isn't it? Like the first the first lot of drugs are free, and then like you get hooked on from that point onwards. That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's it. Start them young, as they say. but excellent stuff. So going back to, of course, you got Elements of Justice. Of course, like it's still a very much an ongoing project. It's currently episode 3.5, so it's on current hiatus at the moment. So when it comes to writing Elements of Justice, and you're comparing it, of course, there's obvious comparisons to Turnabout Storm, which is the spiritual ancestor that was made several years ago in 2012. Do you ever find it like a nerve-wracking experience to like follow up from that, because it's still considered a highly regarded fan piece in the media? Do you find it like difficult or challenging to follow up from that?
Difficult, not so much. I think in terms of just like how I feel about it, I am obviously, a little bit, especially towards the beginning, I was like especially like unnerved about following up on it, as I'm sure Al Javis was. The way I would describe it personally is Turnabout Storm is the original Ace Attorney trilogy, where everyone is just beloved, everyone loves it. And then you've got like the more modern Ace Attorney games that do sort of different things compared to the original trilogy, where there are aspects that people like, there are aspects that people might not like as much. And I'm not particularly talking about the sequel trilogy. I could be talking about the Great Ace Attorney, which some people say that's better than the original trilogy. Some people say that it's not as good. I personally think it's amazing. But yeah, I think it's definitely one of those things where, especially in terms of the length as well, the original trilogy is, aside from the case that you're about to start, the 5th case of the first game, it's surprisingly like short, especially the first game. Whereas and Turnabout Storm is just its own single case of 5 episodes.
Yeah.
The more modern Ace Attorney games are a lot longer because I think they can afford to get away with being a lot longer, compared to being on the GBA.
And I think they had a bigger budget as well. That certainly helps as well.
True, yeah. And obviously Elements of Justice is quite a bit longer than Turnabout Storm, so there are definitely like comparisons to be made between like Turnabout Storm to the original trilogy and Elements of Justice to the more modern Ace Attorney games, especially in terms of the length and the things that they try to do compared to the original trilogy.
It's definitely interesting that there's a lot of parallels, isn't it? As you're saying, like
Yeah,
definitely a lot
there
of
is.
parallels between, like comparing like Turnabout Storm to the original trilogy of the games, and you're comparing Elements of Justice to the newer, more modern titles and stuff like that. And comparative, of course, you got Turnabout Storm comparing it directly to Elements of Justice. I kind of hesitate to call it I suppose a sequel, but I know it is a sequel from a narrative perspective, but like
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to do it justice. Or that's, for a lack of a better phrase, I don't use the term justice so many times, but it's because like EOJ is such a completely different animal compared to the humble beginnings of Turnabout Storm was, because Turnabout Storm, it was it's beloved by many, but like looking at it again, I watched it again the other day just to see like how I feel about it. Of course, when I come back from Galacon, like I still enjoyed it, but like you can definitely see where it has aged in different ways, and like but they very much did what they could. Neo Artemis did what she could
Yeah.
with no resources and everything, and making what she did with a team of volunteers is really inspiring and stuff. But like comparing it to like that to EOJ, like especially now, like how EOJ continues to develop and how technical, how itself has advanced. Like how like you got the like visually, like you got like the models that are pretty much accurate to the show, and like the new fancy rigs and the how like the better audio, and like there's a lot more of it as well. It's like apples to oranges. It's the same sort of thing, but like it's just, I don't know. EOJ is sort of, calling it like a direct sequel doesn't really do that concept justice, I suppose, because of how things are developed and how things have moved on and things like that. It's pretty crazy, but like it's nice to see the continuity between the two. But like compare it, like how things have progressed is pretty crazy. Like when you compare them side by side, especially is.
I think you could still technically call it a sequel because if you look at the original GBA release of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, particularly when it comes to the music, it definitely has not aged very well. There are some tracks in the original GBA release, especially the Logic and Trick track, where when it was remastered for the DS and just made all around better, it basically just became a completely different song. Like it sounds very, very tinny on the GBA release, and some graphics just got completely remade for the DS.
Yeah, it
Obviously,
makes
because
sense. Yeah.
the GBA didn't have a backlight, so there were some things that needed to look very different compared to a console that obviously had a backlight. I think there's definitely an argument to be made that it's more of a spiritual sequel as opposed to a direct sequel.
Yeah, spiritual successor. That's probably more accurate, definitely. But yeah, I forgot about that. Like the Game Boy Advance did have a backlight in the SP model, but that didn't come out
Yeah,
till 2003 or four. I can't remember now, but that was a few years afterwards.
yeah,
But what they had to do in the old GBA days was like, because of to compensate for the lack of a backlight, they had to adjust that, like really blow out the contrast on the sprites on a lot of games. Donkey Kong Country did that. I think notably it looks so when you play it on the SP, it looks absolutely terrible. But anyway, so, and again, like you also got the problem of like once you got to the newer generation with more resolution and texture capability, like when you they had to redo a lot of stuff to make it fit on the newer screen, and then but yeah, it's a constant battle of having to keep updating everything for like newer screen standards and stuff. It's just,
yeah.
but yeah, but comparing the newer HD releases to the originals, it's like night and day. It's pretty crazy, and you don't have to worry about like sound compression and everything, because like even modest laptops and stuff can do uncompressed audio and textures and things. So it's just it's pretty. It's a good time to actually get into it now, I think, because of all the updates and the mod cons. Like, you don't have to like worry about like finding the original hardware and it looking a bit crunchy and what have you. You just play the new fancy HD re-releases, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and all the games besides the Latent crossover have been released, so it's definitely as good a time as any to get into the series because you've got all the games to play now.
You don't have an excuse now. As long as you got Steam, you can get them on sale when you can. That's
Yeah,
the
pretty
best thing.
much.
But yeah, so so of course, like when it comes to Turnabout Storm and Elements of Justice, would you say having a prerequisite knowledge of MLP and or Phoenix Wright is essential to enjoy either series, particularly EOJ? Do you, for example, would you recommend people to play the games first to actually enjoy the series, or do you think people can still enjoy it without having playing the games or even watched MLP, for instance?
Well, I think you can still enjoy it because I watched Turnabout Storm without really knowing anything about MLP. The only things that I knew were, a couple of character names because of internet memes. Like that Fluttershy holding something meme. Where the Phoenix is like in ashes in her hand, and then they just sort of like superimposed anything onto her
Oh yeah, I see.
boobs.
I know. I remember that one
Yeah,
now. You're
that's
right.
a really old one, and also Rainbow Dash because she had like 50 memes back in the day. Those were the only two character names that I knew, and I really enjoyed the characters in MLP. Especially considering they were like early days for the characters. 'Cause it was made like post season 1, so they didn't really have a lot to go off of, really.
Yeah, that's
And I
true. That's
and I
true.
still enjoyed them quite a lot as someone that knew nothing about the series.
And like, even though like it didn't actually bother you at the time, you're thinking, oh, it's got My Little Pony characters. Like, why would I want to watch that? You'd still, because it was Phoenix Wright. I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. That's the mindset behind it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing really is just having an open mind because I went into Turnabout Storm with that mindset and I got a really well written case. I was very impressed by it. But in terms of elements of justice, we definitely do go a lot more in depth in terms of the characters because we have a lot more characters to deal with. Characters that have a lot more going on with them than Phoenix, who has kind of not necessarily a limited backstory, but a more simplistic backstory
Right.
in terms of knowing him as a character. Whereas Dual Destiny spends the entire game sort of like building to Athena's backstory, which we go into in case 2. Because this is actually reminds me of we're actually set. Elements of Justice is actually set post Dual Destinies, and I think it's post season 5, or not pre-season 5, but before like certain characters like Starlight Glimmer get introduced or anything like that. So we are like set like in the middle of certain events. So like we're set like pre Starlight Glimmer and things like that, and we're also set pre Spirit of Justice. Because that was the reason for that is mainly just because that was the newest content at the time when Al Javis came up with the idea for the series.
Right. Gotcha.
That's literally the only reason, and we just sort of stuck with it because the idea was there, and we didn't want to just like push the series like 5 years down the line in terms of like what content had been released.
Right. Gotcha. And it can't have been like, it can't have been easy though, I suppose, like, because you're having to work with those parameters. I suppose you have to like work within that specific time frame. For you can't like reference stuff that happens much later because it doesn't happen in the series or whatever. You have to. That can be quite difficult, I suppose, in some ways.
It is really, because especially with Athena, because she doesn't really get much in Spirit of Justice, as I've said, but we had to give her a case that kind of did her justice, which Spirit of Justice, ironically does not.
Yeah, a lot of people have said. Sorry to interrupt you. A lot of people have said. I've been looking in the comments. A lot of people have said Case 2 does a much better job of giving Athena a good run for her money, compared to the games, which is a nice compliment to receive.
Yeah, I was especially happy to see that because it means that we actually, because that's the main thing at the end of the day. I wanted to give her a case that her fans enjoyed because they deserve something because they've been getting scraps.
Hopefully she will. Hopefully she will get more in the future, but we'll have to see. Like as you're saying, if the games have been doing rather well, in the re-releases have been doing really well. We can only hope. We can only hope. And like as I say, like now I've got plenty of games in front of me to play over Christmas, so I've got plenty of catching up to do, which is good.
Yeah. Something will happen. It just depends on what it will be.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. What was I going to say? I'm trying to think of. I think Turnabout Storm was the first. As an aside, was the first. I didn't actually watch MLPG4 until maybe 2014, 2015, I think, thereabouts. So that's after a few series have passed, of course. And I think Turnabout Storm was one of the earliest projects I came across, like in terms of MLP. And I never played Phoenix Wright up until that point. I only played it very recently, as I've said. But I used to watch a lot of the. I don't know whether it's still around. I think it's still around. Newgrounds. I think it's still around, like the old Flash website. I used to go around there a lot back in the early.
I think it still does exist, but I don't think as many people post to it for obvious reasons.
As I say, it used to be like the haven for video game parodies and stuff.
It did, yeah.
But I used to spend an awful lot of time on there watching old Flash parodies, and like Phoenix Wright was among them. And
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Phoenix Wrong, yeah.
Phoenix Wrong. That's it. I knew you'd get it.
Yeah.
The Encyclopedia Britannica.
Ancient memes. Those are some old stuff, though.
Coming flooding back to me. Like I did watch one of them again, like just to see what was one of them was like. I was like, oh, it's rough. It's rough. It's rough. But like they're nothing compared to the stuff that the Phoenix Wright community come up with in recent years. Like the Paula Peroff animations of top draw.
Yeah.
Like, they're absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love those. You got the one with I don't know who made it. I'll have to look it up. But there's the one where like Edgeworth is like running like rotoscoped. You've probably seen it. Like, the dog video where he's running around the fucking.
On the dog show, yeah.
On the dog show, I absolutely adore that one. Absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant. He does the flips and everything. It's great.
The Ace Attorney Twitter account actually retweeted that, actually.
Oh, that's brilliant. But yeah, I was just watching that the other day. So, this is fantastic. This is absolutely fucking brilliant. I love it. But like, I was just saying like how much time has progressed and stuff. Like the memes and parodies are like completely on another level compared to what they used to be. But that's how my first interactions with Phoenix Wright was anyway. I only started playing the game recently, but it starts off with the memes, and I actually go, let's actually play the game and find out what it's all about. And G4, so Turnabout Storm was one of the very first Phoenix Wright and MLP fan projects I come across before actually watching the series or playing the games, which is weird. It's kind of a weird way. I don't know whether a lot of other people are in the same position where they interacted with the fan content first, then went back to the original series or games or what have you.
Well, that's what happened to me with MLP. So
yeah. So when did you first start watching it? Was it not long after you finished watching Turnabout Storm, or was it a bit later than that?
It was a little bit after Turnabout Storm, because obviously there was an extra episode that we were not anticipating, and once all 5 episodes had been released, I just thought I'll give it a try. And I really enjoyed it. I went back to the start and then started watching it from there, because obviously 2 years had passed since then.
Yeah, it's pretty. It really was a lightning in the bottle, wasn't it? G4 was like how it's the impact it had.
Yeah,
and it still has ramifications now. Like, of course, like it's not in its like 2014, 2015 heyday where it's like probably peak popularity. I'm talking about, but people still remember it fondly and watch it constantly, and people are still making really, really excellent like fan parodies of it and fan works and stuff, which is pretty crazy. And like for me, it's sort of it's certainly had an impact on me, definitely, of course, like a lot more than I care to admit, I suppose. But it really was like really was something else, and like it's sort of you probably ain't going to see that ever again. It's sort of like lightning in a bottle, I suppose. I think that's the best phrase I would say.
As long as there's love for it, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if it's mainstream. It's just as long as there are people that really do care for it, that's really all it boils down to. That's what really matters at the end of the day.
And yeah, and people really do still care for it a lot, and it's great to see people are still really enthusiastic, of course. And of course, EOJ is one of the big MLP related projects and Phoenix Wright projects. I come to think of it, that's ongoing and still in current development, and people are really enjoying it, which is really, really great to see. I'm not going to speculate what I think is going to happen because I don't want to try and not trying to coax spoilers or anything out of you, of course. But even if I'm not intentionally trying to anyway. But it's I really can't wait for it to come back. But while the project is on hiatus, it does give me a bit of time to actually write my own stuff, which is good.
Yeah,
I got a bit of time. I got a bit of time to a selfish reason. I got a bit of time to catch up and actually work on the video I'm working on. I don't know when I'm going to release it. This is the first time I've actually mentioned it to anyone, really, other than G, of course, and the first time I've announced it on my YouTube or what have you. So I'll do it in several parts. I think I'll do case 1 first of all, and then watch case 2 again, because that's going to take a.
yeah.
I really need to sink my teeth into that, because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about regarding that, because it's pretty the way I watched it was pretty full on. I really and again, I'm weird. I watched it in a really weird way. I wasn't really focused on the characters in the dock, I suppose. I was more focused on the interplay between Athena and Luna and how those two characters were playing off each other. I was really enjoying how for a lot of it anyway, Luna was in control of the narrative and giving Athena hints every now and then without actually explaining that she's giving hints. She has to be indirect about it. But then as Athena starts to get more confident and starts to put holes in Luna's plan, she starts to get more agitated and she starts to be more aggressive. It's really, really good. I really enjoy that aspect of it an awful lot. I got what I wanted out of case 2 just from that, but I do want to properly watch it again before I start writing the second video on that, because there's way too much stuff for me to just talking it's not just talking about the case itself, but I also want to talk about the behind the scenes stuff as well, because it's G's fault. I'm going to say it's G's fault.
It definitely deserves its own video.
I definitely think so, because it was his. I did when I first asked G to come on the podcast. I don't know whether he's going to listen to this. He might do, he might not. But anyway, I'm going to say it anyway. But he was very, very gracious in coming on, talking to me about the show and how he felt about things and stuff like that. He went into a lot more detail than I could have ever hoped for or anticipated or expected. He talked about a lot of the behind the scenes stuff and how it affected him and stuff like that. And it was basically that episode where it gave me the idea. I haven't actually made a video essay in probably 10 years, literally 10 years or something like that. I haven't done YouTube stuff in 8. I've been out of the game for ages, but I felt like I'm not doing anything. I thought I haven't done any Blender stuff for a while. I've got no projects on the go. I thought I'll probably make an EOJ video, and I am working on that, writing the script as I speak, and I'll probably get something maybe probably as a rough guideline late January. But it was literally his interview with me, of course, that gave me the idea. I can actually maybe try and write something about EOJ and talk about it in more detail, because I did like the Kate's video on it, Kate reviews video on it. She did case.
I enjoyed that as well.
Case 1's definitely watch that video, guys, if you haven't already. It's a really good video. But I've got the nagging feeling I could probably maybe push it a bit further, maybe go into a bit more detail and things. I don't know if it's going to be successful or not. I don't know, but I'll give it a good go. But I'm definitely not going to do case 2 just yet. I need to do case 1 first and actually redigest all that, because there's a lot to take in, which is it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult.
I think it is the longest in terms of content. I think it is the longest case in Ace Attorney history in terms of even fan content, because obviously we have to have the lines voiced out The longest case in Ace Attorney history is the final case of Spirit of Justice, which I think is like almost 15 hours. Whereas I don't even know how long case 2 is, to be honest.
I think it was. I think G said it was over 24 hours now. I
Yeah.
could be incorrect on that. It's
around about that. Yeah.
you can't do it in a day. You can't do it in a day. It's longer than a day. I'll put like I'll count it. Put it on the video version. I'll put like a time code or whatever. But yeah, it's not something you can do in one go, as I tried to do and I failed to do. But yeah, it's really, really lengthy, and there's a lot of stuff to cover, and that's just the case itself. I want to talk about the behind the scenes stuff as well, but that's going to be a very daunting task. I think that's going to take a while for me to actually break it down and like really explain how I feel about it, because I've got a lot of things to say about it. I want to really give it a fair crack of the whip. I don't want to.
The way I would honestly describe it, because there is a case that is actually quite similar to it in terms of like how I feel on it, not in terms of like the content itself, but just in terms of like how it goes. There's a case in Ace Attorney Investigations 2, the second case, like funnily enough, which is a lot longer than the first case was. It's also a lot more complex than the first case was. It's also a bit too long for many people's liking, mine included, and that's trying to remember the official name for it now, because they changed all the case names in the localization. The captive turnabout. It's also a case where some of the characters spend a lot of time going after a false lead, which is also like a connection to our case, which is very interesting. Because it's a good case, but it's definitely a bit too long. It's also a bit too complex, which I think like the main criticisms that people have with crusading for a turnabout.
It's definitely one I'll definitely want to look through again. I think, but again, I don't want to like criticize something because it's long. Because like again, it's again, a lot of people are going to say like maybe a case 2 is a bit too long. But again, it's thematically it does make sense for it to be long. There is a case for it to be, because of how like this case is. Not all cases are the same, of course. You know, not in real life, of course. Not all cases some are simple, some are complicated, some are in between. This is one where everybody is. A lot of the characters are suffering under the weight of this whole thing. They're trying to figure out what's happening. There's loads of twists and turns, and like it just keeps going and going and going. It's like you could argue it's long drawn out because like the case is complicated and like the characters are struggling to try and fathom what's going on and trying to get to the bottom of things, and there is a case to be made on that front. So I don't want to like dismiss it outright, but by saying it's too long. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I can understand why a lot of people feel that way. Maybe it's a bit too convoluted in place, and I think G also shares some of those sentiments where like he prefers case 3 over case 2 for several different reasons. But again, bit of a plug, listen to that episode, listeners, if you haven't listened to it already, a bit more context. But yeah, so case 2, it's a lot of, I've got a lot of things to say about it. It's just I want to try and collate them in such in a cohesive fashion. That's going to be the difficult part, I think.
Yeah. It's definitely an Athena case. You either love it or you hate it.
Like definitely a Marmite sort of case.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something. It's quite it's a chunky boy. It's a chunky boy. Oh, to deal with. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how Kate Reviews deals with it as well. If she ever decides to do it, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think she is doing it. It's just case 2 is case 2. It takes a lot. Yeah.
It's a big gelatinous. There's a lot to go through. But yeah, that's quite a task for a single person on their own to actually get through. But yes, but anyway, you mentioned you're the arranger on the show in terms of music. So how does that play out then? Do you pick you basically pick like the compositions are already made for you, and you get to pick where they go in the episode? Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm still trying to follow the idea that Aljavis had, which was case 1 music is from the first game, case 2 music is from the second game, Justice for All. Case 3 music has Trials and Tribulations music, and so on and so forth. There are obviously going to be some additions, like, because obviously we changed Athena over to like be the attorney in Case 2. So what I did was I put in some Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice music as well, along with Justice for All music, because obviously those are the games where she debuts in. And Case 3 has Sonata, and what we've done is we've sort of tied her to the investigations games in more ways than one. So what we've done is we've put in investigations music as well. So we've obviously added to the original outline because, you know, the cases are so long. Having just one game's OST in the case, unless it's something really short like Case 1, it feels a little bit thin in my opinion. So we obviously want to like beef up the OST because there's obviously more tracks to pull from in that case.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's what happens is I make like an OST document. I started doing this once Case 2 started. I think it was the very first episode that we did. I did this was the very first trial episode, so that'd be 2, 3, and I write out all the music tracks that I'm interested in having, and having like the timestamps and everything. The line which they appear on or they appear after. It's basically just how it goes. Is just using sourced tracks as well as custom tracks that Jarvi and the other musicians make themselves, along with any other tracks as well. Because it's what I've tried to do is not just rely on Ace Attorney, because you'll have noticed that there have been some other tracks as well, like sort of Ace Attorney adjacent is what I like to call them. You know, like Ghost Trick, which was made by Ace Attorney's creator, Shu Takumi, and the OST is done by one of the Ace Attorney composers.
So there's that link there,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
it fits into that same general vibe. There's also some Zero Escape music, which is another visual novel hybrid sort of style game. There's also some Professor Layton music as well, you know, mainly tied to a certain character from Case 2, Private Eye, for obvious reasons. But all those are sort of like in the same general sense of, you know, if they're not Ace Attorney music, they're Ace Attorney adjacent, you know, barring some exceptions, you know, like if we want like a really spooky scene, we've used some Silent Hill 2 tracks. Al James has even composed a Silent Hill inspired track for, I think it was the When Athena Has a Nightmare.
Yes,
Like,
yeah. I was thinking it's got to be that one. Yes, gotcha. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, Al Javis personally composed a Silent Hill inspired track because he liked what I did with the Silent Hill 2 music in 2.4. So once the investigation hit, he started making like another sort of track in that same vibe. It's not just me that I don't have like complete authority over it or anything. It's just I know all the games, I know all the music. So if there's any tracks that are a bit more obscure that can work, you know, I'm the one to go to in terms of like, would this work? Or like, do you know anything that can fit this like scene?
Like fit it thematically, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because there are some tracks that you know, everyone knows, like all the courtroom tracks, but there are some tracks, especially like in the investigation sections of the game, that they rarely, if ever, play because they are just like they only play in like very specific situations.
Right.
But they could work for a scene, and if they do, then I've got them all archived on my computer, so I'll just
you've got the soundtrack. Oh, that'll work. Okay.
yeah.
But don't you ever have like any issues when it comes to music and stuff? Like, don't you ever have any issues with maybe copyright and stuff like that, like having using the original tracks, or do you have to use like alternate versions of them, or slip different versions that you have to make yourself?
There've been no copyright issues besides what G mentioned in your episode
Right.
with him, you know, regarding Message, which I regret doing now, to be honest, because I suggested that track to use for the Case 2 credits on Christmas Day, no less. So
It's your fault then.
kind of
It's your
sucks. Yeah.
oh no.
I had no idea how absolutely batshit insane, like the music industry is, especially Sony music. I didn't even know it was tied to Sony before like we started getting issues. But Capcom, they're completely cool with using their music. They're completely cool with pretty much anything really. Besides, the only time they've actually taken things down is when they are preparing something. Like I think there was a download video for the fan translation for Ace Attorney Investigations 2 that got recently taken down, and people started getting ideas like, "Oh, Capcom planning something," and then lo and behold, in a Nintendo Direct, Ace Attorney Investigations 2 is being localized. So they generally only take things down if they are planning something like in the immediate future.
Oh, okay.
But even then, it's just like music tracks don't really apply to that. It's just mainly like the games themselves, and like if you're like cock blocking with them from like making money.
Yeah, YouTube is weird, isn't it? As well, like with the copyright system, it's one of the Bonds of Justice episodes was like turning to Made for Kids as well, which
Yeah,
makes
that's
no
really.
sense.
I think it's mainly just because MLP kind of gets hit with that like made for kids like hammer quite a lot, which kind of sucks. Especially since it like removes the comments, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, that's the worst part about it, I
We
think.
like reading the comments, so like to just have them all like removed entirely is just like what are you doing? What are you doing, YouTube?
At least make them readable,
Yeah.
like don't remove them outright. That's kind of shitty, but it's been like that for a long time. But yeah, the of course of course them from using just the video game soundtracks. Of course, that you've also like you got your EOJ's got its own music team as well. Jarvis like composed quite a few bits and pieces as well. There's a lot of really good compositions in there. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, there are. Not even just like character leitmotifs. Sometimes he has actually composed tracks that are essentially like our versions of like Ace Attorney tracks. Like there's one track in Case 2 that is basically like our version of a like Logic theme
Right.
that plays at a couple of moments, which it's really really good. Especially since he's gotten a lot better. I think he'll admit that he's gotten a lot better since he started at the very beginning of Case 2 as well. So he's been doing it quite a while.
So he's now the head. He's the team leader of the writers, also the team leader of the music. He's doing a lot of stuff. He's doing a lot of
Yeah.
quite talented. I'll have to see if I can get him on the podcast and talk to him specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, if he's interested, of course. But yeah, it's pretty. I was looking at that for okay, so like. He's the leader of the team. He has sung your praise as well. I've heard, like in the videos that I've seen of him talking to G and stuff. Like he's mentioned you a few times, and it's also the lead composer, which is pretty crazy. And like he's done a lot. I've been listening to the soundtrack. It's like he's composed those as well. That's pretty dope, I have to say. That's like I'm green with envy. Like the amount of talent that the EOJ's got. I count you. In that as well, James, as well. So, but it's pretty.
A full video of the OST for Case 2, and it's really really good.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'll put a link into that in the show notes so people can actually watch that. But yeah, definitely go check it out. It's pretty dope. But anyway, that was my side. I think that's everything I want to ask you, James. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I do appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed it.
It's been super.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to me about Phoenix Wright, and I've learned a few things along the way, so thank you so much indeed for that. I don't know who's going to be on the next episode. I don't know if it's going to be an EOJ thing or something else, but we'll just have to see. So, thank you for listening, everybody. Take care.